TV shows and one movie you need to watch if you love fashion. And they're kind of niche, which is fun. Hey guys, it's Phoebe. Welcome back to my channel. I'm gonna skip the long intro and just get right into it with my first show that I think you need to watch if you are obsessed with fashion, and that is The Durrells in Corfu. This show is a period piece set in the 1930s and follows a young English widow named Louisa Durrell and her 4 children. And she kind of notices that none of her children are happy. They're all kind of struggling in different ways, as is she. So she takes this massive leap of faith and just up and moves her entire family to a super small town in Greece called Corfu. I don't think it's crazy small anymore, but at least in the 1930s, it was very small. It is a really wholesome show that follows the family's ups and downs, getting settled into their new life in Corfu, shows them meeting a bunch of people, getting into some trouble, forming some relationships, some romantic interests. It's such a sweet show. All of the characters are incredible, and I can't recommend it enough. Because this is a period piece, it is just so fun to watch for the fashion of it all, regardless of what your own fashion aesthetic is. I feel like when we consume more contemporary content, when we're looking at fashion, we so often are just like good, bad, yes, no, would wear, wouldn't wear, because it can be more directly transferred into our daily lives and visualized as part of our lives. And to a lesser extent, I do think we still kind of do that with fashion from the 90s and 80s and early 2000s, fashion from the past that is still kind of similar to today and really influences our contemporary fashion taste. But I feel like when we're looking at fashion that dates all the way back to the 1930s, it's a lot easier to just appreciate it for what it is, because chances are we know we're not going to take full direct inspiration from the clothes and apply it to our daily lives because it's just so far removed from contemporary fashion culture. We don't really spend as much time comparing ourselves and comparing our styles to fashion that is that old because it's not relatable. Whereas when we're looking at fashion from newer content, whether that's online or on TV or out in the world, we do kind of make judgments quickly and compare ourselves and picture ourselves in those clothes because it's just generally more applicable to the current times. That temporal distance between us and almost 100-year-old fashion helps us, like I said, appreciate it for what it is, appreciate that captured moment in fashion, and then maybe organically be inspired to take certain little elements of it into our current style. The costume designer on the Durrells in Corfu was Charlotte Holditch, and she used many original 1930s pieces when creating authentic looks for these characters. And in 2017, she was nominated for a British Academy Award for Best Costume Design. My favorite styled characters in this show are Louisa and Margot. Louisa is the mother, and her clothing kind of reflects the traditional motherly duties of women in the 1930s, but her outfits also kind of reflect the difference between when she's in stressed out single mom mode and when she's in her power, being her own person, confident in her choices out in the world as herself. And that is really kind of fun to see the evolution of her character going from almost hopeless single mother who feels like she can't do anything right on kind of a 2 steps forward, 1 step back journey of becoming this like free woman that has a happy family and a really unique, interesting, fun life. And it's really cool to see her wardrobe reflect that. Margot, on the other hand, she is the only daughter of the family. She's 17 years old, and her style really reflects her character perfectly. It's youthful, it's vibrant, and it's slightly more like revealing, playfully revealing than most women might dress in the 1930s. Margot can't really keep a typical job. She is called dim by her brothers a lot. She calls herself dim, but she loves fashion, and she is a lot smarter than even she gives herself credit for. And I think her styling is spot on for this type of character. The other fashion adjacent thing I love about the aesthetics of this show and about the styling of these characters are the very 1930s traditional beauty trends that are reflected. The super short curled at the bottom bobs, the light makeup with lipstick when they're getting dressed up. It's gorgeous and feels so nostalgic and simple. There's also so much good men's fashion in the show. It's all just beautifully done, and I think that's true no matter how far removed it is from your own personal style. Side note, my sister Maddy just posted a video that's super similar to this. She did TV shows you need to watch if you're obsessed with interior design, and she talks about this show as well. She talks about the beautiful house that they live in Corfu. So if you're interested in interior design and interested in watching that video, you should go watch that as well. I'll link it in the description. Moving on to Lovesick, another British TV series, and I'm convinced that British TV is just generally superior to American TV. Lovesick is this really cute sitcom that came out in 2014 that is about a 20-something romantic guy named Dylan, and the show opens on him finding out he has an STD, and the entire show just follows him going down the list of girls he slept with and telling each of them what has happened. And so each episode roughly is a flashback to one particular girl, how they met, how they ended up getting together, and then ends with him in current times telling her the situation. But who I really want to talk about is one of Dylan's flatmates named Evie, who is also one of his best friends. She and his other flatmate Luke have been with Dylan through the past entire decade, and we get to know more about them and their stories through all of these flashbacks and present day storylines as well. Spoiler alert, there's lots of chemistry between Dylan and Evie, so you're kind of rooting for them to end up together the whole time. As for the fashion of this show, it could not be more of a perfect 2014 time capsule, especially Evie's style, which I admittedly would never wear today, but 2014 Phoebe definitely would have. Again, there's something really inspiring about a really strong personal style, even when it doesn't match yours. Evie's character has this eclectic, vibrant, but earthy style that maybe has some influences from the 60s or 70s, with all of the 2014 trademarks of long necklaces, headscarves, and high top knots. I think half the reason I'm so obsessed with Evie's looks is because it's just so potently nostalgic to me, and half because, like I said, seeing anyone with a strong personal style inspires me to embrace my own. I'm beating a dead horse at this point by saying this, but some of the best inspiration can come from admiring expression that is totally different to your own. Inspiration doesn't have to be as binary or as direct as I like that, so I will wear it, or I don't like that, so I will not wear it. I think sometimes being a little bit less self-centered when gathering inspiration can be really beneficial, really impactful, and deliberating. You can just let yourself enjoy and appreciate something without feeling the need to apply it to your own life. Carol K. Miller was the costume designer of Lovesick, and she talks about how it was really challenging but really fun to work on a show that's constantly bouncing back and forth between flashbacks and present day. And she describes the result of her work as a vibrant, energetic piece of costume design that she's super proud of. Go off, Carol. Moving on to one that I won't spend quite as much time on because it is about fashion, so it's a little bit more self-explanatory, and that is Very Ralph, the documentary about Ralph Lauren. It's obviously about how Ralph Lauren got his start, how he came into his design style, and about how a designer whose primary focus was to create wearable clothing that enhances people's daily lives, ironically ended up being one of the most groundbreaking designers of our time. This movie is absolutely just filled to the brim with fashion inspiration from the late 60s till the present day. But if you're like me, you'll find the most enjoyment just seeing what he and his family wore throughout the years. My favorite part of this movie is when he talks about his wife Ricky, who has always kind of been his muse ever since he met her. He talks about how inspired he was by her simple style and her simple elegance. And it's just so fun to see her outfits and her personal style and witness how much her style and the whole Ralph Lauren brand umbrella really feed off of each other. Beware, because this movie will make you want to wear brown and denim for the rest of your life. Okay, moving on to a series called Better Things. Better Things ran from 2016 to 2022 and follows Sam Fox, a single mother who's raising her 3 daughters in LA, as well as looking out for her mother who lives across the street. While the show does have really strong plot points, I would almost consider this show more of a character study. It perfectly highlights the nuances of parenting, of relationships, of growing up, all without ever insulting the audience's intelligence by just spelling everything out to you or hitting you with very in-your-face storylines or lessons. It's very real and very well done. It's also written and directed by Pamela Adlon, who plays Sam, the mother, which is also very cool. I love the fashion in the show for the same reason that I love the storylines. The fashion is very nuanced, it's very raw and real, and it perfectly reflects each character, all while being more visually interesting than I think most costume design on family-centered shows. I particularly want to call out the styling of the 2 eldest daughters, Max and Frankie. Max Max is around 15 years old when the show first begins, so we follow her through all of her older teenage years. She has all of the style tropes of an angsty teen, all while maintaining a level of individuality and creativity that I think is super indicative of her being raised by a mother who allows her children and encourages her children to express themselves fluidly. And Max is played by Mikey Madison, who I think is just the coolest. Frankie is the middle daughter, and right away her styling clues us into her more gender fluid expression. This show is really unique in that Frankie just exists as exactly who she is without there being much overt mention of her gender. There is a scene at the end of season 1 where Max tells her mom that Frankie is a boy, but then it doesn't get mentioned again until season 4 when Max denies that she ever said anything. Some might think that this is problematic, that this wasn't discussed in more detail, and as someone who's very gender normative, it's not really my place to say whether that's the case or not. But what I will say is that the lack of focus on Frankie's gender seems to be not because she doesn't feel safe to talk about it or doesn't feel safe to express who she really is, but kind of the opposite, because she was raised in a house that clearly allows her to be who she is, allows her to feel safe in that and not have to justify it or label herself, and because her life circumstances have just allowed her to be who she is and feel safe in it. Pamela Adlon has talked about how her own household is very fluid and she wanted to create characters that were fluid as well, but she didn't want to feel pressured into making it more powerful or timely. And again, it's not my place to make the final judgment about this decision, but I do think the representation of a household and a community that treats a gender fluid person just as they treat everyone else without milking it as a main plot point is a pretty groundbreaking step forward. And Frankie's style is really inspiring and moving for that reason. Minka Draper worked on the costume design of Better Things, and as I said, I think she did a fantastic job. On to the last show, and I might lose some of you with this one, and that's because it is an animated series, but I promise you the show is fantastic, and that is Avatar: The Last Airbender. If you're not familiar with this show, it originally aired on Nickelodeon, i.e. it was made for kids. However, it's such a good show and it's so well done, and I promise adults all over the world like this show, okay? Anyway, in this show, the world is divided into 4 nations: the Water Tribe, the Earth Kingdom, the Fire Nation, and the Air Nomads. And there are people who are benders, which means they have the ability to manipulate the element that their nation is named after. Only the Avatar can master all 4 elements, and the Fire Nation declared war on the rest of the world 100 years ago. The Avatar hasn't been seen since, and only he is powerful enough to defeat the Fire Nation and save the world. And the show opens on Aang, the current Avatar, being discovered by the 2 other main characters, Katara and Sokka, who are from the Water Tribe. And it follows those 3. It follows Katara and Sokka helping Aang realize all of his powers and go on this journey of trying to fully develop into the Avatar and therefore save the world before the Fire Nation conquers everyone. And as for the fashion side of things, I know it's hard to refer to the looks in this show as fashion because they're animated, but part of the character design is also designing the clothing that they wear, and the clothing plays a really important role in this show because it really plays a part in illustrating all of the characters' identities and their cultures' identities. And even though these looks didn't like go into manufacturing and become actual pieces of clothing, there is still fashion design in there. The character designers had to design all of these looks, and what I'm saying is I just think they did a really beautiful job. As I said, the fun thing about the looks in Avatar is that they're all really culturally based. Each tribe has their own unique way of dressing that really reflects their daily lives, reflects the element that their nation is named after, and unites them as a people. The Water Tribe live at the South Pole, so their main function of their clothing is to keep them warm, and they're all different shades of icy blue and periwinkle to reflect that cold climate and to reflect the fact that they are the Water Tribe, and to help us as viewers really quickly decipher what kind of character we're looking at. The Earth Kingdom wears greens and tans and golds. The Fire Nation wears deep reds and dark blacks and dark grays, and the Air Nomads wore humble tan and orange pieces. They do a beautiful job of subconsciously cluing you in to what kind of character you're looking at, what their intentions are, what their personality and identity is based on what they're wearing. The characters of Avatar: The Last Airbender were designed by the 2 co-creators of the show, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. I know people have their opinion about Avatar because it's not real anime, but it's an incredible incredible show, and if I didn't sell you on it based on my fashion analysis, you should at least watch it for the story. Okay, that was my last one. I hope you stayed with me through it all and that didn't go down too weird of a rabbit hole. But as I said a million times, I think it's so fun to get fashion inspiration from places and pieces of media that aren't solely produced for the purposes of fashion, especially in fictional shows like these where the fashion has so much to do with the storytelling. It's just a whole different level and different side of fashion that I think we don't spend enough time in as fashion lovers a lot of the time. A lot of the time we're getting inspiration on Pinterest and social media, and inspiration that we want to directly apply to ourselves. But I think it's so fun to take a step away from that and dive into all the other sides of clothing and of fashion that can be so much fun to spend a day in. Let me know if you like this video. If you would want me to do a part 2, I would love to. This was so much fun to make. And with that, I'll see you guys in a few days with another one. Bye guys.